Welcome to Strip Coverlet, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Fort, and we are here for another poetry discussion, which will appear in two, count them, separate playlists here on the channel. Number one, obviously, being the poetry discussion playlist, but number two being the Emily Dickinson poetry discussion playlist, where we have lots and lots of Emily Dickinson going on. Emily Dickinson being simply the greatest poet of all time. Number one, it's law. I didn't make that up. That's out there. You can find it. It's all over the internet now. That's what all the kids are talking about. If you didn't know, I just figured I'd fill you in. The poem in question today is number 917 in your trusty, handy-dandy collected poems of Emily Dickinson. The complete poems of Emily Dickinson, number 917. It is a short one. This was sort of, if you really sort of look at Emily Dickinson's poetry, there is in the beginnings, there was storytelling going on, sort of. Then I think she really hits her stride. And then what appears to be traces of madness, dare I say, sneak in. Now, not really madness, but things that are harder to understand, things that are more difficult to sort of wage war with in your mind. And she begins to experiment much more with form and not form and brevity. So that is what happens to Emily Dickinson eventually, and we actually find Ezra Pound sort of playing with the same things much later. In fact, I believe Ezra Pound probably during the writing of most of his poetry would not have known about Emily Dickinson. Emily Dickinson, very obscure until there was a book released well after her death. But anyway, we're here for Love is Anterior to Life. 4 lines, but it's reminiscent of another Emily Dickinson poem, which obviously you can see the beginnings of at the bottom of the screen. But here we are. Love is anterior to life, posterior to death, initial of creation, and the exponent of earth. So, what are we talking about here? We're talking about love. What we talk about when we talk about love. But I can't talk today for some reason. Emily Dickinson is a very big fan of a very large diction. She enjoyed her words. So we have love is anterior to life. What are we talking about there? Love, anterior, means, so if you look it up, most of the definitions will have something along the lines of, quote, near or nearer to the front, end quote. So what we have here is Emily Dickinson stating plainly that love is where life begins. Your life begins the moment you find love. Your life is not really life until you have someone to love. Posterior to death, meaning that love, that same love, survives you. After you're gone, that love will still remain, or after the one that you love is gone, that love will still remain. Initial of creation. Love is initial of creation. Basically, I think what the poet is saying here is that, so it is a biblical sort of argument, right? Creation. Anytime you see the word creation, you're going towards religion. This is the poet saying that it was with love that humankind was created by a higher power. Now, the higher power in Emily Dickinson's life, the higher power with which she seemed in her letters, which she seemed in her poetry to struggle, would have been the Christian God. There are no shortage of conclusions drawn over how Emily Dickinson felt about God and religion. But if you read enough of her poetry, I think what you start to really sense is someone who struggles with those ideas. Not someone who has necessarily, well, someone who has definitely made a decision on whether or not they believe in God, but someone who has made that decision and the opposite decision on several occasions. That is how I feel about Emily Dickinson's religious beliefs. But here in this poem, she is stating that it is with love that our creation was initiated. The exponent of earth. Now, depending on where you find this poem, if you find it in the complete poems of Emily Dickinson, it is the exponent of earth. Other places, it says the exponent of breath. Now, I'm not sure why that would be breath. I am not sure how that came about. A good deal of Emily Dickinson's poetry was edited posthumously before it was sent out into publication. But I don't know how breath would be transcribed from earth. But here's the thing, I mean, regardless, kind of. We're going to go with earth because in the complete poems of Emily Dickinson, it says earth. Here's the thing with exponents. So you think, well, what's exponent? When you hold something to an exponent, it's a multiplication. Yeah, and that's true, but it's a little short-sighted. But it stops a little quick in the definition. But exponents being multiplication is not the entire story. The exponent of earth, when you multiply that number, you're hitting it over and over again. So it's not just 5 to the power of 2 is not 10, it's 25. So the exponent of earth means what you're doing is you are multiplying something by itself. So 5 to the exponent of 2 is 5 times 5. That's 2 5s. 5 to the exponent of 3 would be 5 times 5 times 5. So when you're looking at exponents, you are multiplying something by itself. So for love to be the exponent of earth, what we're really saying is that love does not expand your world. It expands your world by what you thought your world was. Everything you had, you were multiplying it by itself. You were one person. You were held to the power of 2. Now that doesn't quite work. But what it does is you were talking about multiplying something by itself to be an exponent. So it's not simply a doubling. It's not simply multiplication. It is even bigger than that. And exponents, you will often hear this if you are... One thing that you hear about a lot in business, one thing that you hear a lot about in relations to the stock market, one thing you hear a lot about in relations to manufacturing is that people, and I'm sure there's other places, I'm sure this doesn't come from those realms, but it is often observed in those realms. People don't deal with exponentials well. Why? We simply don't know how to imagine them. So again, 5 to the exponent of 2, 5 times 5, doesn't really compute with you. If you say 5 to the exponent of 2, we don't know exactly how to think about that, right? Because getting the answer of 25 seems bigger than we thought. However, once you start going a little bit further, 5 to the power of 5, so 5 to the power of 2 is 25. Well, that sounds weird. 5 and 2, how do we get 25? 5 to the power of 5 is 3,125. We don't compute those things very well as human beings. It is something, the exponents are something which sort of mystify us. So love being exponential is something that mystifies us in size. But this poem itself is one that reminds me of another Emily Dickinson poem. And if we have an excuse to look at two Emily Dickinson poems, I'm just going to take it. The brain is wider than the sky. For put them side by side, the one the other will contain with ease, and you beside. The brain is deeper than the sea, for hold them blue to blue, the one the other will absorb, as sponges buckets do. The brain is just the weight of God. For heft them pound for pound, and they will differ if they do as syllable from sound. That is the brain is wider than the sky is one of my sneakiest favorite Emily Dickinson poems. It is a medium length poem with a great opening line that if you're not paying attention will be the highlight of the poem, but I don't think it is. For me, that final stanza is the highlight of this poem. For the brain is just the weight of God. For heft them pound for pound, and they will differ if they do as syllable from sound. That is all I have for this poetry discussion from Emily Dickinson. If you enjoy what I do here, hitting that like button really does help me out on the channel. It tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers, and if you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing that I talk about on this channel, dropping several videos per week, doing poetry every Mondays, but also talking about short stories, also doing novel read-alongs, also doing writers' quotes, all of these sorts of things. And there are playlists on this channel for all of those things if you ever feel froggy. So, if you are here by chance but not design, consider hitting the subscribe button, stick around for more, and I hope to have you back for the next one.